New Elvis. For weeks after, people talked about the Little Blue Suede Shoes Chapel and the kidnapping of Bart the Elvis impersonator. Many thought it all really started the moment Susie hired Bart, the Elvis impersonator, at her little chapel, the Little Blue Suede Shoes Chapel, where, up until Bart's hiring, only midgets had worked as the officiants. Having a little Elvis to officiate one's wedding was, well, the prime draw for most people who came to the chapel, and as such, Susie might have done well to simply close the chapel for the days that any of her true little Elvises couldn't show up. But instead, she, as she sometimes did, exercised a certain amount of denial and hired Bart, the non-midget Elvis, to work the day that Gary, her previously scheduled little Elvis, didn't show up for work. And so, upon the arrival of planned-to-be-married couple Janine and Jason straight down from Denver, Colorado, there was immediate hell to pay. Susie tried to stave it off. She welcomed Janine and Jason and oohed and awed over Janine's cute little light blue mini dress. Then, before the bride-to-be could look around for her expected little Elvis, Susie whisked Jason and Janine into the dressing room, giving them a few winks and telling them not to delay. Their wedding would start in 5 minutes. Janine wasted no time admiring herself in the mirror. She stretched her long arms above her head and cocked her head to the side, smiling seductively into the mirror. Jason stood off to the side and admired her too, until he couldn't help himself and grabbed her around the waist to give her a long kiss, telling her, upon breaking their romantic lip lock, that this would be their last kiss as single people. Janine felt a lightening of the tension in her neck as he said this. Newly divorced, she'd feared even as recently as 5 months ago that she would be an unwed mother of 3 for the rest of her life. But then Jason had appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, and soon enough, she'd concocted the idea to give her ex-husband full custody of her children and get married to Jason. Her new life was about to start. Jason had picked this Little Blue Suede Shoes Chapel as a launching point for their new fun and young coupledom. Kids aside, ex-husbands and ex-wives aside, only fun. Fun, fun, fun. As long as nothing got in the way of it. Sometimes it was true that Janine felt herself trying a bit too hard, as if she were clenching her fists in her attempt to have fun. But then she'd look at what her life could have been. Alone with her 3 boys and their mounting piles of laundry and her bills and her lonely nights without anyone. And she knew that if she were to start again, she would have to clench her fists a bit. Susie, the wedding chapel owner, didn't know any of this about Janine. And so Susie, dressed in her tan short shorts and Madras halter top, walked over to tell Janine that today her ceremony would be officiated by Bart, this tall Elvis. Susie had no idea that Janine's vision of the way this wedding was supposed to go down because this was the way her future was supposed to start would be shattered. Bart stood idly. He ran a hand through his wave of gelled Elvis hair. He was hungover, and the pleather bodysuit he was wearing didn't let his body breathe, so sweat was pouring down his back. He'd responded to Susie's call only because he could use an extra few hours, and she had a full roster of couples scheduled for the day. Only Bart knew that Gary was not showing up to work that day or any other day, for Bart had heard that Gary had run off to LA with a stripper he'd taken home last night. And if Bart knew Gary, the relationship with the stripper might not last, but Gary's resolve to make it to LA might. So Gary wasn't coming back, and Bart was here to fill in. And in the meantime, Bart just wanted to get the day started and over with. Suddenly, Janine allowed Susie's words about the missing little Elvis to sink in. There would be no little Elvis. Susie kept repeating that the chapel would comp them photos. They'd offer free photos, and the ceremony with Bart would be great. Janine only heard noise. She grabbed Bart's hand, and then she grabbed Jason's hand, and she ran up the aisle toward the door. Suddenly, with the force of voice that Bart hadn't heard since his own grandmother used to tell him to clean his room, Janine yelled that she and Jason were getting married for free in the parking lot, and Bart was going to do it or else. Susie stared, as the threesome rushed out the chapel door and into the sunshine. From behind her, the sound of sweeping from the new chore boy she'd just hired calmed her nerves for just a moment. She took out her list of weddings for the day. This one was a wash. She drew a line through the couple's name. She hoped Bart would return after he wed the couple for free out in the parking lot. She had 9 more ceremonies to go. But as she approached the door of the chapel to look outside, she put a hand to her mouth as she saw the bride and groom shove Bart into their silver Subaru and speed off down the road. Susie turned back to the chore boy. He was all she had now. He might look good in an Elvis suit. She could pay him Bart's wages, or part of them, at least. These weddings wouldn't be legal without a real officiant. For that, she'd have to do the honors. The new chore boy Elvis could stand beside her while she married the rest of her 9 couples that day. As she approached the boy sweeping, he looked up. He noticed Susie was smiling in a way he hadn't seen before. She took him by the arm and steered him to the employee dressing room, where she instructed him to find the Elvis bodysuit that fit him best. He couldn't believe his luck. In Vegas, anything could happen.